Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
I am going to explain the different models of cognitive mind, and here how the different scientists as well as philosophers they have been explaining, or they have explained the concept of cognitions, mind or consciousness indifferently. And generally cognition is one of the important aspect of the human mind, because it involves issues like how we acquire knowledge, how we store knowledge, how we retrieve knowledge, and how we use all these kinds of knowledge with the help of our cognitive system. If we use cognitions every time and acquire a bit of information, place it in or use of information in some ways, then cognition must include a wide range of mental processes. And cognition is not so simply we are only acquiring knowledge or storing knowledge or something. It is more than that. Through cognitive processes we can achieve many kind of things in the world, and we can do many kind of discovery with the help of our cognitive faculties. And here I am concerned only in the case of human cognitions, not in the case of animal cognitions. But in the case of human cognition you will find there is one kind of development is there. Because of that we are rational being or rational animal than any other beings. There is a change is there in the human cognitive processes, but not in the case of animality or in the case of any other beings, like in beings like plants and animals. Cognition generally is a process in which information is encoded in the brain by receiving signals from the outer world through the sense organs. Sometimes even if we may not get the knowledge from the outer world, knowledge also arises from the inner world, from the inside. It emerges the knowledge and it represents a new idea, and through the cognitive activities we explains our creativity abilities. It seems that cognition is largely different from that of, therefore it seems that human cognition is largely different from that of other animals because of the enormous richness of the human cognitive processes. There are different models of understanding of cognitive mind, and there are different scientists, different philosophers. They have explained the cognitive model of mind. Even if in the last lectures you have seen how functionalists are explaining and how the mind is functioning, in that way they are explaining the mind consciousness in different ways. But here also you will find some of the scientists and philosophers they are explaining consciousness or mind or cognitions in the similar way. And some of the things which I shall be repeating in these sections to make you more clear on the cognitive aspects of mind or consciousness aspects of mind, or the importance of mind in the scientific realm. Now we will go through different model of understanding cognitive mind. There are many models which I have put before you, and the one is neuroscientific model, psychological model, representational model, computational model, isomorphic model, multiple realizability model, multiple draft model, and subpersonal model. And all these models are plays very important role in explaining cognitive mind. Let us see first neuroscientific model of mind. Neuroanatomy is the study of the nervous system structures and is concerned with identifying the parts of nervous systems, and it describing how the parts are concerned to each other. Here neuroanatomy can be made at many descriptive levels. According to neuroscientists, investigations can be made at two levels. and this is the neuroscientific view. And firstly, gross neuroanatomy, and this gross neuroanatomy is about general structures and connections, whereas fine neuroanatomy is the main task that describes the components of individual neurons. And secondly, histology is the study of tissue through the dissections, and the primary concern of neuroanatomy is to ideally connect the patterns of connectivity in the nervous systems, lay out the mechanism that allows informations to get from one place to another. For neuroscientists, this neuroanatomy is the analogy of cognitions, and cognition is nothing through which we are explaining this neuroanatomy, that is cognitions. While explaining neuroscientific approach to cognitions, Francis Crick, a famous neuroscientist as well as a neurophilosopher, and he said that the brain does not make a distinction between hardware and software as a computer does. Theories have made these distinctions are unfortunate. What Crick is trying to show is that the way even if functionalists have explained about mind or consciousness is that there is they have done one kind of distinction, that is software and hardware. But in the case of neuroscientists, there is this kind of distinction is not there, the software or hardware, or the neural is something and neural process is something, but neural and neural process, both the things, they goes together, and the way they have done the distinction is one kind of unfortunate, and I think for Crick it is not acceptable. And Crick argues for theories of cognition that are strictly tied to biology, which implicitly force him to argue for the study of simple cognitive acts, such as visual word detections, rather than the complex acts such as paragraph comprehensions or etc. For neuroscientists, especially for Crick, mental actions depends on the psychoneurological factors underlying in it. Any kind of mental actions, whatever we are doing or acting, it depends upon the neurological factors underlying it. No mental actions is without these factors which determine the mental history of an agent. Although Crick's general discussion is on the concept of conscious thought, virtually all the specific studies he cites deal with visual cognitions. For him, it might be most profitable to deal with vision entirely within the field of neuroscience, while dealing with language comprehension in terms of psychological machines has no known neural basis. Therefore, for him, cognition is a multi-dimensional process which needs a many sides approach, and neuroscientist claims that there is a process happening in the brain that they have measured in terms of 40 hertz. The 40 hertz process is nothing but the consciousness. Consciousness is accessible in this 40 hertz level, otherwise all other level it is not measurable, and they have measured consciousness, and the way they are measuring consciousness, it is they are quantifying the consciousness, and this quantified consciousness is explainable in terms of neuroscientific model. Now, we will see the psychological model of mind. The psychological approach to cognition is defined as the psychology of understanding and knowing. It is a study of mental processes. It is concerned with the way we take in information, the outside world, and how we make sense of that information and what use we make of it. According to Groom, one of the famous psychologists, for him, there have been three main approaches to the study of cognitive psychology, namely experimental psychology, computer modeling, and cognitive psychology. Firstly, experimental psychology involves in the use of psychological experiments on human subjects to investigate the ways in which we perceive or learn or remember or think. In this process, the experimental psychology is concerned about how the human mind remember the things. Secondly, cognitive psychology is the use of computer model of cognitive processes, and this approach involves the simulation of some aspects of human cognitive functions by writing computer programs to test our models of possible brain functions. And this model, especially many brain scientists, they have been trying to study the human brain processes and what he or she thinks and how the mind is functioning. With the help of different kind of advanced program, they are trying to investigate on the human cognitions. And lastly, cognitive neuropsychology is concerned with the activities of the human brain during the cognitive processing, and this is one of the important aspects. Whenever we are doing any kind of activities, during that period how our mind is functioning, how we are remembering, how we are reacting to a particular situations. In that level, this approach of cognitive psychology explain the psychological level of cognitions. Although cognitive neuropsychology plays one of the vital role in the case of neuroscientific model of mind, because as you have seen that the neuroscientific model is trying to explain this cognitive psychology with the help of neuropsychology. Therefore, in another way, in different angles, both the cognitive neuropsychology and the neuroscientific model of mind or cognitions are going together to investigate on mind. Now, you have to see the representational model of mind is one of the important model of mind. The representational model of mind, there are many scientists, they have explained it in a different way. Some scientists, they have explained it syntactical, some scientists, they have explained it semantical way. But here I will be explaining how the syntactic way the cognitive system is explainable through representations. The representational theory of cognition tries to show how our knowledge of the world is represented in the mind, and when human knowledge is represented in an abstract format, we call it propositions. Thus, all knowledge representations take place in language. Here, the language is one of the main things which plays important role to representational model of mind. The representational theory studies the mental representations in a formal language called the language of thought by J.D. Fodor, and this language of thought I will discuss in the next lectures very clearly. Let us see first what is this representational model of mind. A representation is something that stands for something else. For example, the words of any human language are forms of representations because they stand for objects, events and ideas. Words are an abstract representations because the relation between a word and the object signified or the idea it represents is arbitrary. Words in our language can refer to the same objects and ideas, and in few cases the referent of a word cannot be predicted from its auditory form. There are many words, even if you say something which has no representations, you can say even if golden mountain, which have visual representation, actual representation is not, it has no existence, but you can have some kind of pictorial mind in your that there is something called golden mountain which is exist in this world, but there is nothing called such as golden mountain in the real or empirical sense. But in the case of mental representations, mind preserves information about objects or events in the world. For example, when we have a mental representation of table, and this representation preserves location of the object in the space, it supports a number of abilities including imaging the place, estimating the distance from the memory, and so on. Many kind of things is happening. Whenever I am looking at a chair, there is a distance is there, which spatio-temporality existing, how much the visibility is that there, and the various kind of angles that we have to see in the case of representational model of mind. And this mental representation is necessary because human behavior cannot be explained without specifying how individuals represent the world to themselves. Therefore, this representation model plays important role in the case of this Jerry Fodor, and this representational model plays one of the vital role to explain cognitions or consciousness. And let us see now computational model of mind. According to cognitive scientists, all cognitive processes are computational process, and all computational processes require internal representations as the medium of computations, and then the nature of this medium is such that the internal representation are symbols. The symbols systems facilitate the computational processes, and the computational process is a kind of symbolic way can be explainable, and because without the help of symbolic system it is very difficult to explain any kind of computational model of mind. Therefore, the computational modeling in cognitive science and artificial intelligence has profoundly affected how human cognition is viewed and studied. Computational level of cognitions shows that the mind is a computer which is based on a symbolic informations. In symbolic computations, the abstractions provided are symbols and rules. With the help of these symbols and rules, we are explaining about the human this computational model of mind. But according to the classical computational theory of mind, mental representations are symbolic structures, and the mental processes consist in the manipulation of these representations according to symbolic algorithms, as computation is based on symbolic rules. And Herbert Simon is one of the founder of computer science, discusses the nature of cognitions while constructing models of human mental activities. According to him, cognition is a mental process based on mechanism of the brain. The brain mechanism can be studied by neurophysiology, and further he argues that a human brain functions like a computer, so that the human cognitive processes are computational in nature, and therefore, if we manage to program a computer to play chess, we may have to discover how human thought proceeds. Thus, Simon argues for a sharp distinction between brain as a physical system and the programs the brain executes, and therefore, he urges to concentrate our attention on the program, because program is one thing through which we can able to study the human cognition or consciousness or human mind. And this is one of the important aspect of scientific way of investigating the human knowledge and consciousness. And a great deal of modern study of cognition depends insight that representational level and neural level events can be linked through the development of intermediate computational theories of thought. And even if both Simon and Alan Newell, both of them are trying to show that this insight is based upon a rather sophisticated notions both of thinking and the computation as activities that are carried out by physical symbol systems. As we know, a machine or a computer is a physical device that manipulates electric signals and that stand for the symbols in the equations. The physical system translates signals into a symbol systems. Here computers and engineer paper pencil devices are general computing system in the sense that they can in principle compute any computable function that is definable by symbol systems. To actually compute something, the physical device must be given a set of instructions which are stated in terms of symbols. Thus, computing systems operate systems of symbols to arrive at particular results. and we have to note that algorithm thinking is not treated in terms of the physical machine, because the physical operations that achieve the primitive function such as writing down, multiplying and subtracting have not been specified. But according to Newell and in the modern way of explaining is that a physical symbol system has the necessary and sufficient means for general intelligent actions, and they have been defining. Even if a computational model can be called as physical symbol systems, it has a physical hardware is there, symbol is there, and it is a completely a system is there. Therefore, it is a physical symbol systems. Instead of calling a system a Turing machine, we can call as a Turing machine, we can call as a physical symbol system, and we can call as a computer, and we can call as a robotic systems. Let us see all these definitions on computational model of mind very clearly. By necessary, we mean that any system that exhibits general intelligence will prove upon analysis to be a physical symbol system. By sufficient, we mean that any physical symbol system of sufficient size can be organized further to exhibit general intelligence actions. And lastly, by general intelligence actions, we wish to indicate the same scope of intelligence as we see in the human actions. And here Simon and Newell are trying to say that there is no distinction between human intelligence and this computational intelligence. There is one kind of synthesis, that synthesis one kind of the similar way of function. The way even if human mind is functioning the same way is in the case of a robotic system or a computational system is functioning. There is no distinction between mind and machines according to this physical symbol system thesis. And thus, for physical symbol systems, as we have seen, gives rise and intelligent actions because of the presence of the symbol manipulations according to rules. Even if whenever we do any kind of activities, we follow some kind of rules and regulations, and we do also we express everything else through language, and which are the symbolic representation of the world. In that way, that representation is there in the case of computer systems, and it is not necessary to explain mind in some different way, and therefore mind can be explainable in computational term. The physical symbol system hypothesis plays an important role in showing computational levels of cognitions, because the symbols system hypothesis implies that the symbolic behavior of humans arise because he or she has the characteristics of a physical symbol systems. Hence, the success in modeling human behavior on the symbol systems becomes an important part of the evidence for this hypothesis. The hypothesis helps research in cognitive psychology also. Research in information processing psychology involves two kinds of empirical activities. Firstly, it conduct observations, experiments on the human behavior in tasks require intelligence. Secondly, it formulate the hypothesis about the symbolic process found in the human systems. Not only the psychological experiments required to test the human behavior, but also they point out the experiments which are come out new idea of the design and construction of physical symbol systems. And even if with the help of this computational model, Herbert Simon and Newell and many of them have trying to explain computational model of mind. For them, that mind is a computational process, and consciousness is nothing but a computational process, and the brain process is nothing but a computational process, and whatever is happening in the human brain is not nothing but the computational process that can be analyzable in mechanistic way with the help of these physical symbolic systems. And let us see now another model, isomorphic models of mind. According to this isomorphic model of mind, two systems are functional isomorphic if there is a correspondence between the state of one and the state of other that preserve the functional relations. This model I have already explained in the functionalism in the last lectures. Remind you, I am introducing this model of cognition and mind here. This isomorphic model is one kind of functional isomorphic. According to Putnam, there is a isomorphic between mind and a machine. This functional isomorphic hold due to the causal capacity of functional state of the machines. And for example, when I have a pen, there is a physiological process corresponding to the mental state because of the firing of the C fiber. The brain identity follows that there is a functional identity between the two. Whenever there is a C fiber firing is happening, then I am getting pain. And here there is identity between the one state to another state, and there is also identity between mind and machines. Therefore, there is no distinction between mind and machines. Thus, the identity between the mental state and the physical process of the brain establishes from the functional point of view. That is, in functional terms, the brain state is isomorphic with the mental state. That is to say that there is identity between the software that constitutes the program and the hardware of the machines, which helps the software to be realized in the machines. And here machine can realize this software and software can realize this hardware, and there is one kind of identity relationship between mind and machines. And even if mind can be explainable in terms of mechanistic way, and machine can be explainable in terms of mentalistic way. Now, let us see the another model of mind is multiple realizability model of mind, and this model I have already explained in the last lectures on functionalism. There can be indefinitely many different physical properties which constitute the realization of the same functional property. However, it is also true that the same physical state can realize different functional properties at different times or in different circumstances or in different cases. What is the motto for explaining this multiple realizable model of mind in this way? The functional states are multiply realizable in the sense that a functional state cannot be identical to any particular physical realization of it. For example, someone could write a program using two completely different types of a computer which use different sorts of hardware to run the same program. Here they are trying to say that there are different hardware, but one software program, but one software program can be implemented in different kind of software systems. In this sense, the program said to be multiple realizable. Any number of computers may be used to realize same program. Functionality takes states of minds and mental property to be functional states and properties. Mental properties are realizable by, but not identical with material properties, because as I told you that functionality, there is no identity between hardware and software. In the same way, mental properties are different from the physical property for them, and here the mental properties are they are explaining in terms of functional properties. For example, the same mental property, the property of being in pain, may be realized by one property in a human being, and to a certain extent by another property invertebrate. And here for the functionalist, if someone has now a particular pain, then he or she can imagine that this pain is realized through a particular neural states, and that neural state has an identifiable material structure, and this may be studied by a low level hardware science like neurobiology or like even the hardware in the computer systems. In the case of neuroscience, we can see from the neurobiology, but in the case of computer model, we can see from the hardware systems. Therefore, for functionalism, what makes the state a realization of pain is not its material constitution, but its occupying a particular kind of causal role within our nervous systems. Multiple realizable thus implies that there is a higher level of functional description of physical state in terms of their causal role, which abstract from their low level physical constitutions. It is with such functional properties that mental properties can be identifiable. Here this multiple reality model is one of the finished model to develop high technical system, because philosophical model behind any kind of computer systems, and which philosophers have tried to understand the human mind, then they have tried to implement in the system, and that this multiple realized model is now possibility is there. Even that possibility may not give a sufficient explanation of the human mind, that may give sufficient explanation on machines. Now, we will see multiple draft model of mind and subpersonal model of mind. These two models has been advocated by Daniel C. Dennett, and Dennett is one of the propaganda of a functionalistic model of mind or a mechanistic model of mind, and he has been arguing that mind can be explainable in terms of machines. Let us see this PPT. The multiple draft model given by Dennett suggests similarity between the function of the human mind and those of the computer. The brain system functions in relation to different subsystems. So, there are multiple drafts which operate within an artificial systems. According to Dennett, such an analogy is beneficial because it analyzes consciousness from the point of view of the language processing. This is given importance precisely in the sense that a linguistic or language speaking being is considered not only as a conscious being, but also a rational being. Even the robots as information processing system can also be characterized as intelligent systems. According to Dennett, if we see, and he has been arguing that we are machines and we are just very sophisticated machines that has been organized molecule instead of metal and silicons, and we are conscious. So, there can be conscious machines like us. It is even if a machine is a component of material object, in the same way human beings are also component of material objects. In this way, these material components are existing in both the cases, and if anything at all, the so called mind is there and it can be explainable in terms of machines. So, the human thought processes and language processing in the artificial systems are analogous to each other. In the case of conscious thought process, we are aware of thoughts, at the same time there is a psychochemical processes which goes in our brain. And Dennett's functional analysis of consciousness is divided into two parts. Firstly, subpersonal view of consciousness and the multiple draft model of consciousness, and both these models plays vital role to explain the mechanistic model of mind. The subpersonal model explains consciousness and other mental activities through the help of neurological states and process of the organism, whereas in the case of multiple draft model, if we see, it discusses how an artificial system behave intelligently. And if we see, if you make the difference between these two models, and in one model is explaining from the macro level and one level is explaining in the subpersonal level. According to this multiple draft model, all varieties of perceptions, indeed all varieties of thought or mental activities are composed in the brain by parallel, and that is also multi-track process of interpretations and elaboration of sensory inputs. That is to say that it functions different multiple draft as well as in the parallel, and it is like a criss-cross relationship among the neurons, and this even if one neurons functions in different directions in different situations, it is not like that one neuron is functioning for one activities, another neuron is functioning for another activities. Even if one action, there must be many neurons which are giving rise the conscious experience, and Dennett offers a functional explanation of consciousness at the subpersonal level, and this subpersonal level, because this subpersonal level is concerned about the particular neurons, and he says that this subpersonal theories proceed by analyzing a person into an organization of subsystems like organs, routines, nerves, faculties, components of even atoms like that, and it also attempted to explain the behavior of the whole person as the outcome of the interaction of these subsystems. The subpersonal level of consciousness tries to explain now how the human beings are system of organism. Now the question is how the system is being constituted and how the various functions involved in different physiological parts of the organism function together. This is one of the important problem for subpersonal level, but Dennett says that this functional structure would help us in defining the capacity involved in causing consciousness of what we call conscious behavior. Therefore, a state of consciousness is simply one which exhibits certain characteristics pattern of causal relation to other states, both mental and physical. And here he has been trying to say that the relationship between mind and even if the body or even if mental things and physical things are existing in a causal relations. Therefore, all the level of cognitions and which we have discussed are not universally accepted. There are different kinds of model we have seen, even a psychological model to computational model, isomorphic model, multiple realizability model, multiple draft model, subpersonal model. All these models are not acceptable, although they have explained differently about the human mind and about the consciousness, but those are not acceptable really to explain the conscious experience, because which need different kinds of explanations, and that different kinds of explanation is possible with the help of philosophical clarifications, and these philosophical clarifications will give one kind of tentative explanation on mind or consciousness. Even if here I have discussed varieties of cognitive mind, but I have not explained about the connectivity model of mind, which is also part of the varieties of mind, but that I will be explaining in different sections, special reference to folk psychology. But if you see, there are many kind of reactions to these varieties of cognitions, and according to David Chalmers, a computational basis of cognition can be challenged in two ways. First, it can be argued that computation cannot do what cognition does, that a computational simulation cannot reproduce a human cognition, because the causal structure in human cognition goes beyond what a computational description can do. Secondly, computation might capture the human capacities, but something more is required to replace the human capacity. The human cognition can be applied to what is known as memory, attention, pattern recognition, language problem solving, and etc. The most important aspect of the human mind is the selection of information of further proceeding and storage, and the information available during the moment, except sleep and unusual occasions, is vast and complex, and we are constantly bombarded by our senses, because in the case of cognition, sense surveillance plays very vital roles. We get knowledge not only from the inside, it is because of the sense experience we get knowledge from the outside also, and both the things are mutually supplementing each other. All the external senses gives us information which the mind deals with at different stages, and cognition is the output produced after a long process of getting the inputs. And here, although this mechanistic, all these variety of cognitive mind or functionalistic model of mind are explaining about the mind in different ways, they are giving a way to explain consciousness and mind, but these explanations has some kind of limitations that we will see later on. Although these models help us to study the human mind, human cognitions, and there are cognitive disorders, and this may help for scientific community to explain something in definite way, but in the case of, if you see really the philosophical explanation of consciousness or mind, it has different kind of explanations. Thank you.